Well, we welcome everyone, and I just want to welcome you specifically to Mount Vernon and Lisbon League and to our First Street Community Center. And now I am going to have Christy Keys introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudy. I was worried about everyone being ready to listen. I worked with the 50/50 in 2020 back in my 2014 campaign, and really found the group just an amazing group of women. And I was fortunate enough that Jean Lloyd Jones was my mentor at that time, and just a wonderful group of fantastic goals. So today we have their new executive director, Melissa Gessing. The dream of the group was when Maggie Tinsman, a former Republican state senator from Davenport, had dreamed of having an Iowa campaign school for women to help us run. In 2009, she asked Jean Lloyd Jones, a former Democratic state senator from Iowa City, to join her in the effort. And at that time, there were 32 women in the Iowa legislature, and Iowa was one of 2 states who had never had a woman governor, nor sent a woman to the U.S. Congress. So Jean suggested a 10-year campaign with the goal of electing women to fill half the seats in the Iowa legislature and half of Iowa's congressional delegation, and a woman governor by 2020, the 100th anniversary, of course, of women's suffrage in the country. They are a nonprofit 501c3, issue-neutral organization dedicated to achieving the political equity for women in Iowa. They're not a political action committee, and they don't endorse candidates as a group or support them financially. So they're really out to help women learn what it is to run for office and be in office.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us here today. So before I get started, I want to ask each one of you to consider running for office. Because studies show it takes up to 7 times asking a woman before she will run for office. We don't tend to look in the mirror and see a congresswoman or a president. Men tend to do that more often. So I want to make sure you are all invited to run for office. A little bit about me. I grew up in Fredericksburg, up in Northeast Iowa, went to school at Simpson College in Indianola, and my first full-time paid political job was when I was a sophomore in college. I was a full-time paid field staffer for Elizabeth Dole when she ran for president in 1999. So that was 20 years ago this summer. And some things have changed in regards to women running, and some things have not. So we still have work to do. So helping women succeed in politics has been a long-time passion of mine. I've worked in politics on and off for the past 20 years. And I actually joined the board of directors of 50/50 in 2020, right after the 2016 election, and then was asked if I'd consider becoming executive director and throwing the name in the ring for that position when our previous executive director, Mary Ellen Miller, decided to retire this fall. So I've been in this position since October of last year, which was a really fun time to come into this position. We had a lot of fun this last election cycle. So as I mentioned, some things have changed for the better. Some things have remained the same in the past 20 years. So when I worked for Elizabeth Dole, you would have national newspapers writing about her hairstyle or what she wrote in the 3rd sentence of the story. And she could talk about whatever policy position and have a great idea, and her appearance would be the headline sometimes. Now, we see that mentioned with female candidates now. It may not be in the byline or in the first paragraph, but often you still find that somewhere in the story. So, we really try to help women overcome challenges such as that, that men don't necessarily face when they're out campaigning and trying to get their message across. The great thing that we're seeing, though, that has changed is that more women are running. And, the studies still show it takes up to 7 times of asking a woman, but we have more and more women stepping up on their own and approaching us and wanting to run. So that's very encouraging. So as Christy mentioned, our mission is getting women elected. Simple as that. We were founded in 2010 by 2 former state senators, Maggie Tinsman, a Republican from Davenport, Jean Lloyd Jones, a Democrat from Iowa City. And really, you think about it, they were ahead of their time with this idea. They found the first year or two when they started getting this going, it took a lot of, convincing women that they should run and convincing different organizations that there's a need for this and it's really a good idea. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan, issue-neutral organization, and our whole goal is achieving political equity in Iowa. So there's no litmus test to come to our trainings. You can be any party. In fact, we've seen more and more no-party women, libertarian women, other women coming to our trainings, and that has been really encouraging that women don't think we need to get involved, in another facet before we're ready to run. We encourage women to plug into those things, but we welcome everyone right where they are. And so we do encourage women when they come, you need to pick a political party because the way the structure is set up in Iowa, you need to pick a side if you want to have more influence. And so what we encourage women to do, take a look at the party's platforms, find the one that you most align with. But you likely are not going to ascribe to every plank of a platform. And so you can be of a certain political party and be an independent thinker and be a collaborator. And that's really a strength women bring to the table, is that we like to get things done. We like to collaborate. We don't necessarily need all the recognition. We just want to do a good job. And I am a full-time paid staff person for 50/50. But otherwise, it's volunteers who run our organization. We have a 14-member board of directors, all women, scattered throughout the state, 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats. We don't discuss issues or candidate, politics or anything like that at our board meetings. It's all about coming together to help women. And then we also have a 16-member advisory council from both parties, and that is comprised of men and women. So all of those are volunteers who help make our organization run. As mentioned, we're not a political action committee. We do not endorse candidates, nor do we support them financially. We're all about recruiting, training, and mentoring women to run for office. And as was mentioned in the introduction, when we were founded in 2010, we had never elected a female governor, nor had we sent a woman to the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House. We also had very few women serving in our state legislature. And Iowa and Mississippi were the only 2 states with this distinction, and we needed to change that. So 5 goals were set out very specifically. There's a lot we can focus on with recruiting and training women. We very much encourage women to get involved at the local level. It's a great way to get started, whether it's school board, city government, county government, that type of thing. We put our specific focus on 5 areas. So our goals are woman governor of Iowa, an Iowa woman to the U.S. Senate, 2 women to the U.S. House, 50 of 100 of our Iowa representatives women, and then 25 of the 50 state senators women. By the year 2020, 10-year project, 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. And so that's our target year. So that's how 50/50, half men, half women in 2020, that's how the name came to be. So things started to change in 2014. We elected our first female U.S. Senator, Joni Ernst. And then in 2018, overnight, we had an elected governor, Kim Reynolds, and 2 congresswomen, Abby Finkenauer and Cindy Axne. So we've got those top 3 items checked off. And so, now we're at about 30% of the state legislature is women when you combine the House and Senate numbers. And we really need more women to run for the state legislature. We saw a large increase in 2018. And so it's going to be a stretch to get to 50% by the year 2020. But we are making strides. And if you ask Jean and Maggie, the fact that we made this much progress in that short of a time, they're just blown away by that and really, really excited about it. What we've seen and this is in a lot of elected offices held by women, but specifically in our state legislature, the number is stagnated over the years. It kind of goes up and down. And one thing that has led to that is when a female retires, she's not necessarily replaced by another female. Lots of times those seats go to be held by a male. So we've seen a need to develop a pipeline for women. So that's going to be key once we achieve equity, is to maintain it by keeping that pipeline full of women wanting to run and not just saying, oh, okay, we're done, because the work's never done. We all know that. And our organization was based upon an idea of a special training academy for women to deal with those things, like being, your hairstyle being discussed or clothing being discussed, but also, unique challenges on the campaign trail. Women still are largely expected, to care for children or, are asked about where their children are when they're out on the campaign trail. So we tailor the training to specific issues like that, and we cover everything from public speaking, fundraising, door knocking safety, social media, the whole gamut of campaigns we cover. It started out as a 2-day training, and now we've expanded it to a 3-day training to cover everything. So that was the foundation of this organization, and now we have 5 programs plus an annual Equity for Women Award reception. And we're not tied to any national organizations or national funding. It all comes from individuals, and we're a standalone organization. We do appreciate collaborating with other organizations such as the Carrie Chapman Cat Center for Women in Politics at Iowa State. We've done some work with League of Women Voters, exhibiting at convention, AAUW, and some other organizations. So we're really trying to partner where it makes sense to increase our reach across the state of Iowa. And so I'm going to briefly walk through some of the programs we offer. Many women who've had contact with our organization often went to one event or one training, and we want to really paint that picture that we're a full service place to go. Our work doesn't stop on election day. It keeps going all the way through. So our most basic program we have is a nudge party, and that stands for No Use Delaying Gender Equity. And, right? And Maggie and Jean came up with that. They're very clever. Up here on the table, you can grab this brochure as you head out if you didn't on the way in. It has our listing of programs. Now, these were printed, I think back in 2016 we had gotten these printed, and we did not have our 2 congresswomen yet. So this was a student volunteer of ours, Maggie Miller from the University of Northern Iowa. She was at the Capitol one day, and that was then Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds. So we have these brochures now that are already outdated because we have more women to put on the front, which is a great problem to have. But we are nonpartisan with a bipartisan board. And then on the inside it talks about our goals. So you'll want to grab one of those as you go out because it does have a good summary of the programs I'm talking about. So as I mentioned, an acronym, NUDGES, and it is really a no-pressure exploring a run for office type of event. So these are community gatherings where we've had wine and cheese parties or morning coffees. It can be in a home, in a community area like this, at a restaurant. And we get people together, men and women, who want to encourage local women to run for office. So our most recent nudge party we partnered with AAUW down in Keokuk, Iowa, and we had people from the local Republican Party and the Democrat Party at an event together, a lot of community activists, some current elected officials, some women thinking about running, and I just gave a presentation about things to think about when you're exploring a run for office. And so we've held those throughout the state, and we're trying to get more of those started because that's really the thing that encourages the women the most, is seeing, oh, I have these people here who are willing to help me if I do decide to step out and run. So that's kind of the basic ground level program we have. Then we have See Yourself Here, and we do that spring of every year, and that's a 2-day seminar at the state capitol where we show women who are thinking about running for office or committed to running for office behind the scenes at the state capitol. So we walk through everything. We have a meeting with a panel of lobbyists, with the State House media, Legislative Services Agency. You know, there's people there to help you write bills when you get there. We have had women who have successfully gone through our programs who are now elected and working, you know, as senators and representatives, speak to our ladies, and just the whole inner workings of the Capitol. And so it's really a good thing to go to, even if you think you might want to run someday, because you see, oh, I could really do that. It's not that intimidating, not that difficult. And that was where that idea was born, was we had women running for office or thinking about running for office who were intimidated by the process at the Capitol, or who had never been to the Capitol or didn't know a lot of the services available there. And then when we were signing women up for the Blueprint for Winning Academy, it was a big commitment, a time commitment for a lot of women, or maybe they were thinking about it in a couple of years, but they wanted to do something right now. So we created Step Up, which is a half-day seminar. We call it a mini Blueprint for Winning Academy, and we have those in all 4 corners of the state, each odd-numbered year. Sometimes they'll go into spring of the even-numbered year, but we try to do it kind of in the off year, so we're not competing with everything else going on, even though with the caucuses coming up, everything's going on right now in Iowa. So our next Step Up seminar we're going to have one in Southeast Iowa, probably in Mount Pleasant in September. And then in Northeast Iowa, we're looking at Waverly for a possible location in probably October. And then we'll go over to Western Iowa and do those 2 corners of the state too. So those have been really beneficial to helping women decide if they want to run. We bring in local elected officials, have some panelists of women who've been there and done that before. And then I mentioned our Blueprint for Winning Academy. That's our big training program, and we do that in January of the even-numbered years, and that's in the Des Moines area, and women from all across the state come together, and that is from January 23rd to 25th, 2020 in Johnston. And the Blueprint is a lot of fun because women spend now 3 days together, and we put women all together, right? Democrats, Republicans, no parties, libertarians, and they get to know one another as people and not just by the party letter behind their names. And we've had women graduate from our Blueprint for Winning Academy who are philosophically on opposite sides of the spectrum, and they've worked together on legislation when they've gotten elected. So that's been very encouraging. And then we have post-election sessions. As I mentioned, our work does not stop on Election Day. So we just had a third post-election session this past weekend because there was so much demand for it this year. What post-election sessions are, we have one for the women who won their races in the previous election and one for those who didn't. And we don't say that you lost, we say you're going to win next time. And so for those who won, we have our own type of orientation that covers, some things outside of what the political parties offer, such as logistics of, things to handle once you're an elected official. We, encourage them to continue speaking to people of the other party and really continue to be an independent thinker and work for your constituents. And then with those who did not win, we encourage them, we don't push them into running. Again, of course, we'd love that, but it's more just talking about what you learned. If you did run again next time, what would you do differently? That type of thing. And so for the women who did not win, we had a second session this past Saturday at Iowa State because we had so many women who weren't able to attend the one we had in December, or late November, I guess it was, that they asked if we would have another one in a few months down the road. So that was really neat to have that additional session this year. I also mentioned the Equity for Women Award. So one thing that we do every year is we select a female trailblazer in the state of Iowa and honor her in her community. And we have honored the first female police chief of Des Moines, Judy Bradshaw. We have honored Bonnie Campbell. We've honored all sorts of women. So it's not just in politics, but in a community setting too. And we rotate where we hold that each year. And so this year, with 2020 approaching, we realized that by next fall, our Equity for Women Award is likely going to be drowned out in the pre-election craziness. And so we decided for our 2019 award, we're going to award that to our co-founders, Jean Lloyd Jones and Maggie Tinsman. We actually talked them into it. It took some work. We had to work on it for a few months. So we're going to have that in Iowa City September 18th. And so I do have sign-up sheets here if you want to be added to our mailing list, email list, or more information on any of our programs. You can sign on these, and then I'll get you added to the list so you get more information about that when it happens. And the Equity for Women Award is just a celebration of women who are out there, doing the hard work. So that's a summary of our programs. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the current political climate and where we are right now. So we had over 100 women who put their names on the ballot in 2018, which was just incredible. I think the record before that was in the upper 60s. So with that came a lot more work. We had more women to keep in touch with and encourage and do post-election sessions with and that type of thing. As I mentioned before, we're seeing an increasing number of younger women and women who aren't necessarily politically affiliated yet stepping up to run for office. Right now, as far as ranking with a percentage of state legislatures that are female, Iowa ranks 21st out of 50 states. So we're kind of in the middle of the pack. Nevada is number 1 because they have over 50%. I think 51% of their state legislature is female. And as I mentioned, we need to not only maintain equity once we achieve it, but we need to fill the pipeline with women running. And in the past, women have retired from the state legislature only to be replaced by men. So, voters vote on issues first, and that's a wonderful thing. We just need more women running, because when women run, they win in just as high percentage as men do when they run. And that surprises a lot of people, but it's true. And women are qualified. We bring unique experiences to the table. And so every one of us in this room is qualified to run for office. And you can see, without getting into specific issues, but the issues that are coming to the forefront are, the narrative's changing now that more women are holding office, whether it's sexual assault or some of those things that women have encountered more prevalently than men have. So with filling the pipeline, we established, I mentioned the woman on the front of our brochure. She was our first chair of our college organization, 50/50 in 2020 at University of Northern Iowa. And they started a college chapter, I think it's been about 3 years ago now, and had great success. And it's men and women who can join the organization. They set up their bylaws, they have a faculty advisor, all of that stuff. And they focused on getting more women to run for student government. And now they have equity in their student government at UNI. And with that, encouraging women to attend our programs that we have statewide and just get involved politically in college. And so we're looking to replicate that across the state as we go beyond 2020. So we are not closing our doors, January 1st, 2020, we're not shutting down. We'll have to evolve again. We started out with one program, expanded that. And so as we move beyond 2020, we want to get organizations going in colleges and universities. Our name's gonna change probably to 50/50 in Iowa, something to that effect. And, once we achieve equity, there's so many other things we can focus on. So we're continually looking down the road and realizing, as we did from 2010 to now, we'll have to continue evolving to meet the needs of where equity is going. And so just being involved in this organization, as you said, there's just so many phenomenal women involved. And so, I would just ask you to consider coming to some of our events. Like I said, we run on all private donations, so if you're able to donate, we would love that. It's tax deductible. If you want to host a nudge party, that is a wonderful way to encourage women in your communities. Volunteering at our events that we hold. And like I mentioned, consider running for office yourself. And we have one person running for office here, right? Is there anyone else running for office this election cycle? Okay. So if you're in a situation you say, you know what, that's not something I want to do, start to think of someone you can encourage. And the best way I have found, you can host a nudge party, but give them our information and, entice them to come to one of our programs, because once women get get to a training program and see the support that's there and meet other women who are thinking about running too, it really helps propel them forward. So with that, do we have any questions? Because I didn't want to take up too much of my time with comments because I know this is a big topic right now and I want to answer any questions you might have.
Who are your board members, the 14?
Yes, so we have Charlotte Schmid in southwest Iowa. We have Chris Lauscher in northwest Iowa. We have, of course, Jean and Maggie are on the board. We have Courtney Maxwell Green in Des Moines, Ashley Hunt in Des Moines. Libby Slappy here locally was on our board. We don't have term limits, so a lot of women kind of step aside after certain elections. So she just stepped off of our board of directors. Mary Ray Bragg up in Dubuque. Doris Kelly, who's heading up the 19th Amendment commemoration up in Cedar Falls. We have Tita Kaufman in Iowa City. Let's see, Sue Johansson in Muscatine. Linda Malloy in Iowa City. Ann Gale, former president of AAUW. I'm probably going to forget somebody. We've had some, after each election, we have a little transition of who steps on and off. And then a lot of people, we meet every other month. And so it's a pretty big time commitment, and we are a working board. So some people will serve one election cycle, some have been on since the beginning.
Right.
So usually after an election, we see a little bit of a turn. And then some board of directors members will go to the advisory council because that's a little less time intensive too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is the greatest concern of women who are considering running for office, no matter what level that is?
I think the negativity turns off a lot of women, the polarization and the negativity in politics. We had, several women who spoke at See Yourself Here this spring. They were very real with our potential candidates, and they said, there were attacks sometimes on our family and on ourselves, and you just had to, keep your focus on the race at hand and what was important and that type of thing. But really, the negativity turns off a lot of women. Yes.
Someone who I know and who I've been encouraging to get involved in running for office has expressed some concern and fear around running because she has a disability. Is there space within what you guys are doing to address the other kinds of equity that may
Yes.
exist too?
Definitely. And that's something where our programs continually evolve depending upon the needs of women who are approaching us. So definitely, yeah. Yeah.
Have all of the current office holders that are women in Iowa been through your program?
Not all of them. I would say about 2/3 have been. And then in the past, what we found is that a lot of women didn't know about us early on, so they'd maybe come to the blueprint and they think, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known all of this other stuff to lay the groundwork ahead of time, that type of thing. So more and more women are coming through our program. We're also, like I mentioned, the Carrie Chapman Cat Center at Iowa State, they do Ready to Run, and they have scheduled that, and we have scheduled our programs so that they complement one another. So a lot of times, depending on a candidate's needs, we'll refer them there so they can go through some of that training if it's a timing issue with when we're offering things too.
Incumbency,
Mm-hmm.
because that seems really tough.
Yes. So women deciding
Yes.
to run against an incumbent?
Yeah, that,
Mhm.
like, people get reelected easily, right?
Yes.
And more easily, so.
Yep, and we actually had a couple of challenger candidates at our recent post-election session who talked about those challenges, whether it's with fundraising or name ID. And, we encourage women to run. We also encourage women to be smart about when you run. So, the timing is a lot of it. But sometimes women are okay running and putting themselves out there to kind of have that experience, knowing that, okay, it's an uphill battle this time, but these issues need to be raised. I'm going to put my name on the ballot, and then maybe next time, if it doesn't work out, next time I'll be successful. But that is a big challenge, and often women are working against incumbents. It's just kind of the nature of how things are happening, trying to break through the establishment or whatever. And, to women who are hesitant, look at I mean, she's a polarizing figure for some people, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you know, she knocked off a well-entrenched incumbent within her own party, and now she's, you know, leading the way on some issues nationally. So I think there is space for women to challenge. You just need to know what you're up against.
So do you encourage women to, or just like any candidate,
Mhm.
to go out and field to see if it's really realistic for them to run when you're considering an incumbent and everything, so that they're not in a campaign that you're,
Right.
whatever party you're representing, that they're telling that they feel that you're not going to win, then that you could lose that support. So how do you handle that?
Yes. So if I talk to a woman early enough in the process, I will tell her, you know, look at the various places you live. So when you live in Mount Vernon, you're not only in a U.S. House district, you have state House, state Senate, county government, city government. Look at all of those positions, see who holds them. And maybe you're thinking, I want to run for state House, but there's a well-entrenched incumbent in your party who might be retiring in a few years. Is there something else you want to run for instead that aligns with some issues you're passionate about? So I think, too, just looking at all of the options on the table and educating yourself about who's in office. Also, meeting with current elected officials, because a lot of times some of the older, you know, the older guys who are holding those positions are waiting for somebody to step up and run, and they're just talked into running again by the party because they don't want to lose the seat because they've won handily. But yeah, we talk about all of those things with candidates if we talk to them early enough in the process. Now, if they're declared and they're running, we're not going to talk them out of it. But yeah, those are things to consider, and it's a big feat for us, just the education piece of it too, because it's not only women running, but voters. You know, a lot of what women do when they're running for office is educating the voters about their options, you know, and knowing you have a choice in this race too.
I have.
Yes, no, please do. Please do. We've got time.
Okay, so you
You're
stated
fine.
that Nevada was number one for
Uh-huh.
women.
Mhm.
So why do you think, you know, other states, that they have a larger number of women representing them versus Iowa State
Mhm.
at the bottom of the
Yeah.
list for quite a while?
Yeah, so we were at the bottom. I think some of it's a concerted effort of different organizations getting women to run. There have been more organizations popping up, you know, lately, and you know, you compare it, you see more on the Democrat side than the Republican side, and I think the Republicans are starting to get, you know, more going for this next cycle too. But a lot of it's just the activity. And, you know, if you have parties in those states, political parties who are out recruiting women, if you have other organizations recruiting women, I think that's a lot of it. Some of it's the way districts are drawn in certain states that may make it, you know, favorable to one party or another. And if they have more women running in that party, then that naturally happens too. I think Iowans overall are very favorable to women, I would say, as voters. But Iowans are looking at issues first. So at the end of the day, what we've seen is, you know, you can have a man and a woman running, but they're going to look at the issues you stand for first before, you know, voting just on gender. And I think if you ask any female candidate running, she would agree that that's the way to vote. The thing is, if more women run, they're just as qualified or more qualified than the men running. So we just need to get more women running. But, you know, there's no silver bullet to that. And the Center for American Women in Politics has done some studies on, you know, what makes women run and why certain states are having more success. And a lot of it's just that support there, whether it's within the party structure or outside of it.
There is, I don't know where New Hampshire came in on that list,
Mhm.
but I know they don't pay their people very much, and so
Yeah.
the women run. Because the men aren't gonna make any money, so
Yep.
the women run, that's why you have Maggie Hassan,
Mhm.
I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity in New Hampshire for women, because the men don't
Yeah.
tend to consider it good enough.
Yeah. And, you know, Iowa's unique too, that we have a part-time legislature, and that really favors, you know, farmers and attorneys a lot. You know, that's what you see a lot of in our state legislature because of, you know, the timing of they serve January through May, and then go back home. So you're right, those dynamics, pay and time commitment, those all play in. Yes.
What about the issue of raising funds?
Uh-huh.
Campaigns are getting more and more expensive with your, even state campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you help them?
Yes, so we bring in people who do, a lot of what we do is bring in the experts on the different topics and candidates who've been successful in fundraising. So we go through, one of the things we do is we do some role playing. You know, you're going in to visit with someone one-on-one, you're gonna ask them for $1,000, you know. Let's talk about what that looks like and what you say, what you don't say, how you prepare, that type of thing. We tell them, you know, ways they can find, you know, past donors and, you know, develop prospecting lists, writing their first fundraising letter, and the different methods of fundraising. So we walk through all of those strategies and bring in campaign people who've done that too. So it is a big challenge, and that's something we've discussed on focusing on even more, because when women walk away from our blueprint, they need to know, you know, first of all, you can't do it by yourself, but your main focus is, if you're running for office, are fundraising and meeting voters. And all the other stuff you should try to have other people do. But that's, you know, door knocking, you know, being out in the community, meeting voters, and fundraising. Those are your two focuses. And, you know, that's a turnoff for a lot of women too. They don't want to do fundraising. Yeah. But, you know, I know I've worked for a lot of candidates over the years, and I've had men who don't like to do fundraising either, so.
Do you counsel women, that's probably not the right way to approach it, but a negative campaign, if the campaign has become real negative, and so a woman would come to you and say, how do we get above this?
Yep.
How do we do this?
Yes, that's something we talk about too. We encourage positive campaigning. We actually wrote an op-ed for all the statewide newspapers. I believe it was summer of 2018, and I have an excerpt. There's our end of year fundraising letter we sent last year, and this kind of has an excerpt from that. And we talked about calling upon all candidates to run positive messaging and saying, you know, you can contrast where you stand on issues, but this graying somebody's face out or calling names or that type of thing, that's not okay. So a second natural pillar of what we do is promoting that civility, and that's more and more needed all the time, I think. Yeah.
So, but how effective is it?
You know, I think just thinking of the women who went through our programs and won this last time, I think for the most part, they all kept it positive. Now, what you sometimes run into is the state Democrat Party or the state Republican Party will run ads for you, and you don't have a say with that.
Yeah.
And so there have been women in the past who've come to us who have said, you know, that really upset me, that type of thing. So that's a conversation we have in our training too, that, you know, some of that's out of your control, but how do you respond to it, and how do you prepare for that?
How do you respond to that? If that came from the Democratic, I mean, I'm just curious, because you can't go against your party.
Right.
Or you wouldn't think you should.
Right, and so there's a lot of different variables there, whether, you know, if it's on an issue or kind of, you know, what they targeted specifically.
Sure.
But I think just making it clear, you know, I did not pay for that, I did not review that.
Sure.
And, you know, that's kind of the sticky point where sometimes, you know, sometimes the parties aren't always happy with us because we encourage candidates to, you know, speak out on things that sometimes contradict what their party said or did. So we don't openly say, okay, you need to, you know, fight your party on that, but we say, well, here are a couple ways you could handle it. So this is one of those moments where you decide, okay, am I going to toe the party line and go with that, or am I going to, you know, stand up for something that I think supersedes that? So it's, you know, and that's part of, you know, the hesitancy with running for office is you have those different moments where you have to decide and put yourself out there one way or another. Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if you could speak to if you encourage women to run more during a presidential year versus the off year, and whether or not that's contributed to electing more women at all?
We have not really. And quite honestly, we can't take the credit for all the women running and that type of thing. So a lot of times there's situations or issues or, a national feeling outside of our control that you just kind of ride the wave a little bit and, maximize what you can out of that. I think you have to look at, a lot of different variables, your party and how things are aligning, nationally and locally with your party. And, we can say your odds are better this year or it'll be better the next year, but then there's always people who defy the odds too. So we really try to help paint a realistic picture. So you have the information to make that decision. Yeah. Did you have a question back there? Were you raising?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
have a lot of questions.
Oh, okay.
If say I wanted to encourage someone to run for
Mhm.
office, a couple of aspects of that. What are the things that people respond to? What gets them interested in running? And then what kinds of things need to be said to encourage somebody to run?
Yes. I think what motivates more people to run than anything else is an issue. I know a lot of women who have run for school board or state legislature because there was an issue they felt wasn't being handled appropriately. And then also, we've had several women come to us who are running and they said, well, I went to a candidate for him and I'm smarter than that person who was up there. I could do that, It really, we short sell ourselves, and then you see, who's representing you, and they're like, wow, I could do that. So those are kind of the outside factors. I think someone talking to you, I think just telling them, you seriously would be a great candidate, and when they say, oh, whatever, no, really, you would. And, find a couple other people to tell them that too. And then I think as far as directing them, there's our organization. I have my cards up there. Connect them to a local elected official you trust or someone politically who may be trying to get more people to run, and just tie them into some other people so they know they have support, and they can ask questions and that type of thing. But we're always here for any woman who wants to run. We're here to discuss it and advise and help plug you in.
So do you have a sense of what are the top 3 to 5 qualities that a person would have that would make them a good candidate?
Yes, you have to obviously be a hard worker, be persistent. You need to have thick skin, not let things get you down. And you have to be able to say why you are running. I think that, there's a learning curve for a lot of people running for office. You can learn a lot of things, but if you can't explain, if I ask you why you're running and you can't tell me in 30 seconds or less, then you should probably reevaluate that or figure out how to say that. There's a famous debate, I think it was with Ted Kennedy, a presidential debate many years ago, and he couldn't say why he was running. He kind of danced around it, and that was kind of the beginning of the end in some ways. And so those basic things, be thick-skinned and know why you're running and be willing to work hard, and, prepare yourself, know what's involved. But then the knowing what's involved too, sometimes you have candidates, wow, if I knew how much work that was, I don't know. But, all of our candidates we've talked to at our post-election sessions, both in November and this weekend, said they would do it over again. Even if they had tough times, that type of thing, because they learned so much about themselves. They met so many wonderful people, and they were able to put a message out there that they thought somebody needed to speak to. So overall, with women I've talked with, I haven't talked to one who said, nope, I wish I wouldn't have done it. They're all glad they did. Yes.
You continue to offer support once somebody's elected.
Mhm.
What would you say the biggest challenge for those women are after they have been elected or in office? What concerns do they bring up?
Having been elected.
And being in office.
Yes, I think for women, for the Democratic women now at the state legislature, they're in the minority. So realizing that if you're in the minority party, your hands are tied on a lot of things. And so it can be very daunting sometimes. to get things done. And that's happened with, Republican women when they've been in the minority too. So I think that that's been an issue and has really opened their eyes to the way the process works and that type of thing. The other thing is, you see both sides of the coin. Some women are surprised, how friendly people are across the aisle, and then, other people are not. So you kind of navigate, who you can work across the aisle with and who you can't. And just figuring out the system and the personalities and all of those things has been the biggest challenge, I would say. Do you have a question?
You probably already addressed this, and I apologize. I didn't
Oh, no, you're fine.
But Emily's list, I mean, there are foundations and that are really vetting women who they think have the best chance of winning and things like that. How do you feel about that?
Yes, I think the more organizations out there helping women run is great. Whether they're based on an issue or a party, that type of thing.
They apparently
Yep.
research them and interview them, and I think the point is, if you only have this much money, let's put it behind these three. This is where you're going to get possibly the biggest bang for the buck.
Yep. Yep. So their function, is more PAC oriented, donating, endorsing, that
Yes,
type of
it
thing.
is.
Yep.
It is.
And so that's great because we need all types of organizations out there. And so when we were founded, our founders saw a need for an organization that trained and mentored, that kind of stayed out of the issue fray or the party fray and did something a little different. But we acknowledge those organizations are very impactful. And I think, all across the spectrum, they're great to have those organizations involved. Anything we can have to support women running, and especially financially, helping women, I think is great. And so, some organizations have a long-standing history, and, then there's some newer ones like Emerge that is more focused on training, that type of thing, and that one's a Democrat-based organization. So, with those organizations, if they have people who need to be trained, everyone's welcome at our trainings. We just don't decide who is being trained based on party or issues or anything like that. We just want more women running.
Do you have data and research about some of the outcomes of having women in office and the impact
Yes.
and things that they have?
Yes, and you can see many examples. So, what was it, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when the federal government was about to shut down, it was Susan Collins from Maine and women across the aisle who got the men together in the room and said, we're getting this done tonight. And yeah, studies have shown women are better collaborators, get things done, more willing to work across the aisle, just those types of things, and are willing to, help push legislation through and not necessarily have to be, the sponsor or be the headliner for it. So yeah, there's a lot of great information on that. It's CAWP.org is the Center for American Women in Politics, and they have great research on that stuff, yeah. Yeah, and there's even more and more research being done out there now that we have more women. And the other thing to think about too, and we've kind of achieved that tipping point in the Iowa legislature, pretty close. It's been an uphill battle for women achieving equity, not only to get to 50%, but to reach 30%. Because when one group assumes 30% of a body, whether it's women on corporate boards or any facet or any group, 30% is where you can start to have influence. Until that point, a lot of times you have to follow the other people's rules just to kind of stay afloat. But once you reach that capacity of 30% or more, then you can start to change those rules and change the system and that type of thing. So that's what's encouraging while we're still a ways away from 50% nationally and in our state legislature. Just getting to that 30, you're going to see more change and more positivity, I think, as it works up toward 50%. There's always exceptions to the rule too, Yeah.
For your new name, how about 5248?
5248? I don't know, having that year, I tell you what, having that year 2020 has been a little stressful the past 2 years. Because you get that all the time, 2020, that's coming up, you know, even back in 2016.
Population, what would represent the actual population in something like that?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'll mention that to our board. Yes.
Have you already addressed working on campaigns, apprenticeship,
Yes.
whether it's paid or often free? And I've watched with my nephew, who now he's been a firm Democrat his whole life, but for 2.5 years he worked for the one in North Carolina, I forget her name, the woman governor of North Carolina, and he said she was fabulous. I mean, in terms of an employer and all sorts of.
Yeah, Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley, right.
Yep.
And then he went from there to working on campaigns. He worked for Bradley, who sadly didn't win. And I mean, he's lived as almost an itinerant. You go from campaign to campaign, and so you're hired for 9 months at a time. So you have to be able to live that way.
Yep.
But he has done it and flourished. And in fact, he was the communications head of writing all the press releases and the communications coordinator for Obama's inauguration party campaign, everything in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, but he was willing to go where the jobs were, go where the growth experiences, and now he's the main. You'll see his byline on. I'm not bragging about him. I'm using him.
You should.
As an
Right.
example of
Yeah.
what I think. He says he will never run for office. He says he won't. But who knows? But now he's working for the Congressional Budget Committee on the Democrat side, and he does every press release and everything. But it was his, low paid, but he could pay his bills, and often they do stuff like, okay, so I went to New Hampshire for 3 months. They had a place for him to live. They had, so it is, you can get in this vortex of from this to this to this and this, but if you're, it helps to be single, it helps to be a lot of sacrifices like that.
It is. I mean, my first job, I literally worked 80 hours a week, and I think I figured it out. I made like $2 an hour.
Yeah.
Like, it was insane. But that's how you pay your dues, right? Because you get access to so many people, especially in Iowa during the caucuses. When I meet young women and they want to get involved, I say, get involved with the presidential campaign, get involved with the campaign. Because you learn a lot about what's involved.
And so many contacts, and then
Yes.
you see an opening, you're gonna have 15 people that can say, go to this person, go to this
Yep.
person, I bet this person.
Yep.
But, it probably takes 8 or, you want it to go faster because it's 2020, but I mean, it can take some years.
Yep. And there's a lot of women working on the presidential campaigns this year, more than ever before. And so I go to a lot of those events and make connections with those young women because they're perfect people to run for office someday because they have the stamina, they know what's involved. And then we've had former candidates, they've run once out of the gate and they think, well, I'm not going to run this cycle, but I'm going to go work for somebody. And we think that's invaluable experience. So Deidre DeGier, who ran for Secretary of State, she's a state chair for Kamala Harris's campaign. One great example. She's getting, more statewide exposure. She's doing something she cares about. So yes, campaigns are a wonderful way, and that's something I'm hoping as we expand groups on college campuses is something we can encourage women to get involved in campaigns, at college age and those types of things, right away. Because once you get that in you and you experience that, it can pull you in, and it's a good thing.
What is your advice, if a person comes to you and it has a single issue that they're just adamant about, does that make any, what is your advice to that person, or do they usually come to you, or, I guess there's 2 questions, what is your advice to that person, and do you think it's wise to come to you with a single issue?
I would say, what are you wanting to run for, and have you talked to people in that district to see what their burning issues are? So I think it's good to be true to yourself and run on what you're passionate about, but if you're running in an area where the voters don't care about that, you know, or maybe it's, I'm passionate about this issue, this district, it doesn't necessarily resonate, maybe I'd be better suited to run for this position instead. Yeah.
So you do get that counsel.
So, and sometimes it's about raising awareness too. But once again, we, you know, give them some food for thought, you know, think about this, ask these questions, and we're behind you if you run. You know, you've got to run a campaign, you've got to be authentic to yourself too.
Questions?
Just kind of a follow-on to that one, it's so, I noticed that it's so easy to be in a bubble because the people that you talk to and you like are like-minded. So, do you have a good way of helping people find out, you know, what other people in their district that aren't their friends or their, you know, common thinkers? Do you have good training on how to get them out and figuring that stuff out?
Yes, so I actually have a PowerPoint I presented up at Iowa State back in February about the things to do if you're thinking about running for office, and a lot of those are getting involved with community organizations, and a lot of women who are thinking about running already are, but just getting to know people in the community who aren't necessarily political, and having a close group of advisors. Back in the day, they used to call it a kitchen cabinet. That's a little dated, maybe. But having, well, the new term I like, a personal board of directors. That's what we call it now. But having, you know, a dozen people who will be real with you and who can advise you on those things. And having people, you know, from the medical field and teachers, all of those facets, so you don't get trapped in a bubble or just have yes people, you know, that type of
Well, I
thing.
imagine they get a fair amount of education in just going through your programs.
Yes.
Because you go across party lines,
Mhm.
they have exposure to thinking and issues that they might not have otherwise.
Yes, and it's amazing at our post-election sessions, you know, we have women, all parties there, and so many experiences are the same, you know. They cross party lines, the things you face as women, or just as candidates in the current political environment. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else? Does anyone have any questions? Well, I'm sure that you'll stay around if
Yes,
you wanna come up and
definitely.
talk to you
Yes,
personally,
yes,
so we
definitely.
appreciate that. But let's give a big hand to Laura. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you all for
you.
coming.
Yes. And I have these sign-up sheets here if you